digitaljamsessions.com.
Hello and welcome to this Digital Jam session. Today's session is hosted by a guest host.
digitaljamsessions.com.
Hello, welcome to Digital Jam Sessions, live from sunny, not so sunny, the city of London. I am with an amazing panel and our special guest, Rick. We just got off stage at the Microsoft Reactor in London discussing the business of immersive in tech, all the creative that goes with it, behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, how audiences are capturing this. And we're here to tell you a little bit more about it. My name is Mookie Culhan. Welcome back, listeners around the world. I'm an executive digital producer covering all aspects of digital production from web and immersive content and beyond. And it's now time to meet our guests.
Hello, I'm Marta, and you've probably met me a few times before on this podcast. I am a mocap performer, voice actor, and action performer, and also do a lot of other stuff, but that's generally what I do.
Brilliant.
Hi, Marc Schipper here. I'm a transmedia producer, recently sold my shares in Hammer Film, so lots of film experience and some immersive theatrical experience as well, which I'm sure we'll be talking about.
Hi, I'm Rick Hartley. I'm head of emerging technology and innovation. And
At where?
At Brilliant Basics. And we do quite a bit of VR and loads of other stuff involving AI and machine learning and things like that.
Great. And special guest, welcome to the Digital Jam Sessions, the one and only Julian Randall.
Hey, it's Julian Randall here from Digital Domain, looking after business development in Europe. We do lots of fun stuff really across the spectrum, so talk about it some more on this podcast.
Stay tuned.
Hello, it's Daniel and I'm lead creative at Alchemy VR, and we are a factual VR and AR content studio.
BAFTA winning, I hear.
Oh yeah, we've won a few BAFTAs too. It's cool.
First BAFTA.
The first BAFTA for a VR film, should I say.
I think that's a really great story. We'll get to that later. I meant that genuinely, ladies and gentlemen. So, immersive in film. We all know that it's been around a little bit, but it's gotten bigger and better, and the effects have gotten better, the techniques have gotten better, behind the scenes, the way of storytelling, the way that we're experimenting with different types of formats and content to give fans a whole new level of experiences. I want to start with you, Rick, because we're making eye contact, and it's a little bit awkward, but appropriate. So listeners, fill us in and give us your point of view, Rick, on where you think have been the best examples of immersive in film that you've seen.
Ooh, immersive in film. Coming from the advertising space, I would say that a lot of the things we're seeing is a movement away from really bad 360 films and moving towards much more interactive content that is filmic. So yeah, good examples. I can't think of any off the top of my head.
Oh, great. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us, Rick. Fine. Okay.
It's so technical.
Oh, okay. I'll get to you later. Okay. Well, you just come back. Go for a walk and come right back. We're outside on Wilson Street, by the way, because it was a little bit too noisy on the inside. So, Mark, we just got off stage. Thank you for joining us. Welcome. And talking about the types of immersive content and what's experienced in film, how have you seen it change with your background and your career history at Hammer and what's to come?
Thank you, Mookie. So as we talked about on the panel, my point of view is that the first application of immersive in film was the whole point of view found footage movement. Blair Witch is the really the first one that stands out in my mind, where you've got that kind of really addictive, voyeuristic kind of what's going to happen, point of view, POV kind of point thing. Now, then you move on to 3D and actually, the merging really of film storytelling into increasingly cool games. That to me is really cool. Now, then, in terms of my experience has been very much around immersive theater. So live performance, immersive performance to a script with branching narratives. And again, the audience reactions there in terms of theater for the gaming generation are just off the charts great.
Exactly, and it's a great background to have and to see what's to come, having that experience of utilizing the physical into production and things that go with that. So, I mean, Dan, you've done some amazing things, even BAFTA winning.
Indeed.
So how in your mind, how in your point of view, can you describe the best use of marrying what's happening in real life and translating that into an immersive experience for a film?
For film. So I think there's no, like I said, there's no substitute for, capturing a real world environment using 360 filming right now in current technology. I'm currently getting really excited about sort of large-scale volumetric capture, something we discussed on stage. I've seen demos of whole scenes volumetrically captured and played out in real time. Now that's exciting, and I think that's the only thing that will ever really, really replace sort of 360 filming. And as much as people think 360 filming and capture is going to die a sad little death in the next few years, I honestly don't think so. I think there'll always be a place for capturing, a real world environment. There's a place for, CGI environments. But there's also a place for immersing your viewers into somewhere real. I truly believe that.
I concur. And I think most of us here would concur. From a technical point of view, Rick, are you able to chime into that a little bit more now?
Yeah, I think where we're going to see real sort of change is when we start getting into like 360 sound and bringing that into the mix. I think at the moment we're very, very focused on visuals, and we're solving a lot of narrative problems within storytelling with a visual solution, where in real life we just deal with it in sound. And I think the movement towards sound-based narrative and bringing sound-based narrative into the storytelling mix is going to be one of the biggest technological moves that we start to do.
I agree, and I think there's a lot of new techniques that are coming up. As far as how have you seen that change in being a physical action actress?
Yeah, I think people often forget that sound plays a part when it comes to action performance. It's really actually coming through in video games. Now, I wanted to chime in on this bit because I make the rounds at video game conferences quite a lot, and I've been coming across the Audis headset.
What's your cosplay outfit, Martha?
Oh my god, recently I've been doing Captain Marvel because I kind of look like her, and some of the stuff from The Witcher, but that's for another podcast.
Okay.
No, back on the audio point. Yes. No, for example, they've been developing the Audi's kind of 360 headphones for gamers, for FPS, for more accuracy and everything. But I think that's kind of misguided almost. They're just trying to make it fit into a very lucrative market. Yeah. It's just it helps with immersion when you pair that with a real life experience, just like Dan was referring to. And there's companies like Waves that are actually actively developing really interesting things around it. So when it comes to a performer and when you're working in a 360 space, one of the things that you come across that's a very big problem is how to direct the viewer's eye. Yeah. And sound can really, really help you do that in a more nuanced way beyond what I've been seeing recently, which is just somebody from behind where the person's viewing is saying, hey, look over here, and then you have to whip around, and then a few minutes later somebody's telling you to whip around again, and then you just come out of the experience kind of a little bit sick and with whiplash. It's not very nice.
That is not safety first, Martha.
It definitely is not safety first. Health and safety first.
Health and safety first.
Yes.
Rule number one. I would think as rule number 2 of Fight Club. Rule number 2 of Fight Club. Julian, come on now. Julian, come on, Julian. Talk to me.
I told him this.
Say something.
So, Julian, thank you for joining. You are now doing the double dose of the Digital Jam sessions with an AR meetup and the Digital Jam session. So with everything we've just talked about, we're talking about sound and some visuals and the graphics and 360 that we're going back and forth.
Yep.
In your point of view, and also as a fan of the content, what have you seen that's been kind of blowing your mind?
So I think the big thing that's kind of changing right now and really I think is going to help us all in the future is how far the game engines are going. The game engines are becoming more and more real. They're looking more and more realistic to a point where, as a traditional visual effects company, it's okay, well, it's a lot easier to do stuff in the engine, and the engines potentially are going to eventually look to the same caliber of where we are now. Why would you do visual effects, right? Why would you stay in that kind of traditional space? So with VR, the ability of using the game engine to do all these interactive spaces and all these interactive environments and have real-time characters, I think that's really exciting for the ability to tell stories.
I have a question for you, because you're talking about everything becoming more real, photorealistic. Ultimately, to enjoy a story, I enjoy Bugs Bunny. right? Looney Tunes. Now that is definitely not photorealistic, but it is very funny and engaging. So my question is to you, my sense of it, certainly in 2D movies and other pieces of content, it doesn't have to be photorealistic to be an engaging story. So kind of let's have a debate about that, because there's some really cool stories out there that are designed not to be photorealistic. You know, The Simpsons.
Completely. Yeah, no, completely.
What would happen with the 360-degree virtual Simpsons experience?
That'd be awesome.
Smithers.
One of my favorite pieces of VR at the moment has no visuals. It's an entirely audio experience, and
What is that one?
can't say at the moment.
Oh,
But like-
I see.
Well, no, it wasn't mine, and it's under an NDA, so it was. You could actually tell where people and characters were, and you could even tell when they were moving behind trees.
Yeah.
And after a while, you started to create that whole mental image of the whole space purely from the sound. And it was really massively, because it was in a black room and you were just experiencing it just at a purely audio level. It was an incredible piece of VR, and you really did get the sense that you were in a forest at night with kids running around in the forest, and it was incredible.
Great. You know what? Who cares about background noise? But we do care about background noise.
We do.
Because sound is very important. So we touched on the sound element. Let's integrate a little bit more touchy-feely. I love the Tesla suit. I think that's going to be becoming a lot more mainstream and integrated into these day-to-day lives. We were talking about this Oasis thing. We'll pick up on that. Rick, you're nodding your head. I hear some rattling going on in there.
Yeah.
Tell me. Talk to me what's going on in there.
Tesla suit.
Have you tried it?
Yes, I have. It's a really great experience. At the moment, the sort of fidelity is a little bit low, but I think when we get up to the level they're planning on releasing, the realism it gives to an experience, you start to realize the whole 3D scene. So like if someone tries to shoot you from behind, you can shoot them over your shoulder. You don't need to even look. You start ending up doing some very strange disco dancing while in first-person shooters. Which
Can you show us some moves, Rick?
Oh yeah.
Ooh, there goes the ponytail.
That was like a power ballad, a hair flick.
Yeah. So like yeah, it's a sensation that's very strange, and it could actually go into. There's some very questionable ethics positions you could go with, like full haptic body feedback.
VR torture.
VR torture being
VR
one
torture.
of them. Yeah. Certainly, if you crank up the sensation level
Yes.
in Tesla suit, it can be
Yes.
a tiny bit uncomfortable.
Yes.
On your knees on the floor territory.
Can I ask a question?
Well, we are in London, you know.
Can I ask a question? So someone who's tried the Tesla suit,
Yeah.
does it provide a seamless experience? Does it feel intuitive and natural?
I mean, electrocutes.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Like
it
there's
does-
not many real world situations where you are electrocuted and your muscles are forced to contract. So
Yeah.
does it feel like it augments the experience,
normal?
or does it?
Except
Yeah.
for those you don't have to exercise, but you build muscle situations,
machines.
right?
Oh yeah, like those bands.
Yeah, it's like a full body TENS machine.
Right.
But when you're actually in an experience, it does really add an extra level of dimension to it, that actually your brain really weirdly maps the sensation to the sensation it should be experiencing very easily. So like, for instance, like when you pull a trigger on a gun and you get the recoil from the gun,
Yeah.
even though if you did it without the VR headset on, it would feel like your wrist is being electrocuted. It actually
Yeah.
feels like a recoil from the gun in the VR experience, and your brain maps it very almost within a few minutes to the context of the experience you're in. So it's really interesting how we're sort of reality hacking through.
I love that term, reality hacking. Is that one of yours?
That's a keeper.
Is a keeper.
Yeah.
Can I hashtag that?
I think I might have used it on a previous jam actually.
Oh, well, I'm going to revive the reality hacking. So, we've got haptics. I've tried the Tesla suit. We've got sound. We've got vision, sound and vision, and smell. And smell. We've covered smell. Movement. Julian.
What about the omnidirectional treadmill?
I was going to bring that up tonight, and I was waiting for you to bring that up. Tell me about that.
Well, I mean, to have the ability where you can be in your home and you can do full holodeck, you're wearing a Tesla suit, you're on an omnidirectional treadmill, and you can be running an environment, you can be walking an environment, you can just escape. I mean, the whole idea around, or the whole thing around VR, and one of the reasons why video games are so successful is this idea of escapism. And this genuinely lets you escape reality, to hack reality and just leave and go somewhere else.
Hack reality. Hashtag hack reality. I remember all that.
And that's exactly why it's important.
And so when will these omnidirectional treadmills, say that 10 times fast, listeners, when will these become an everyday thing? Like the way, you know, we have these treadmills in our homes and workout things, and yeah, I mean,
it's definitely. I mean, they're in the very early stages right now. They haven't quite got to running yet. They're kind of in a very early walking stage, and it feels a little bit like you're not really controlling your legs. You feel a little.
Show us, Julian.
Some disco moves.
He's cutting.
Very bad movement.
He is throwing some shapes. The hair's not throwing back a bit.
But it's literally at first it's so jarring, like I guess the Tesla suit is, right, when you first put it on. But when you get used to it, you can do kind of little bits of movement. But I think once they fine tune it and you can do full left, right, back, forwards, that's a huge opportunity.
So these are new technologies that will enhance our entertainment experiences. Looping it back to the film. One more thing to Marta's.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm super excited about omnidirectional treadmills because think of it in an esports sense.
Yeah.
One of the first demos that I saw of a treadmill was for an FPS experience.
Yeah.
You can imagine CS:GO or even Destiny or any of these sort of classic first-person shooters. Imagine being able to actually see these people on these treadmills actually running around their environment and having to have those skills to actually play the whole scenario out. It is so cool, and there is such a big opportunity there.
Yeah, and then adding on top of that, has anyone tried the Icarus?
Yes, I have.
Right, so let's talk Icarus.
Let's talk Icarus.
Dan Wan, me and you, give me some of that. Okay, that was a fist bump. Just a bit lame fist bump.
Okay.
So the Icarus is this contraption that's made by a German inventor, and I interviewed him at the Future Tech Now show, and it's a workout.
Yeah, a core workout.
A core workout while you're in a VR experience, and some
while
of it's
simulating flying.
While simulating flying, and many other experiences, and I think that it's got a long, and you're basically lying down flat. So where did you try it? What did you?
I tried it at the Future Tech Now event.
Is that where I've seen you before? Okay.
Perhaps.
Okay.
I tried it there. Look, here's my thing. With all these kind of third-party devices and wearables and whatnot, is that, how affordable are any of these devices? Yes, they're cool. Yes, they're an amazing novelty. But actually, can the average consumer buy this thing? Does it just raise the barrier to entry too high, which is already too high for VR alone?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, forget about buying it. I mean, it's a pretty significant installation, right? Like, it's not a small thing.
This is what I'm saying.
Would you bring
It takes up your front room. Yeah.
Would you bring it into your home and just set it up in the living room?
Well, to reach the mass market for it to become a mainstream product, perhaps it does need to get to that level.
You can go in your home though. So some people put these cross trainer things and treadmills and things and bikes. It does, and I think that they've got really big plans for this kind of thing.
Omnidirectional treadmill.
And omnidirectional treadmills, the Icaruses, haptics, the bodysuits. All of this is looping back to the theme of this podcast, which is the immersive in film. So these are going to be new ways to experience it.
No, absolutely, and I think these things for the foreseeable future will remain very, very specialist devices that are part of a location-based immersive setup. I just don't see them reaching people's homes.
And tell us, what was the big dream situation for you at the panel? That your end statement was a little bit more these kind of VR arcade experiential, so that loops into that.
Right, so, what we're seeing at the moment, there's a big hype of the Void Star Wars experience at the Westfield Malls in London.
As of June 2018.
As of June 2018, yeah. Time-sensitive information, but, look, that buzz can only be a good thing for the whole immersive tech industry. Hopefully that translates into people buying their own VR headsets. The cost of standalone headsets, i.e. the Oculus Go, has, tumbled dramatically from, into the thousands down to the 200s, and if suddenly people start buying mobile headsets, standalone headsets, we suddenly have an install base into the hundreds of thousands, hopefully into the millions. Once we have that, it's up to us as the content creators to create good content, to keep people coming back to their devices, and to incentivize people to buy them in the first place.
Exactly. I agree. And I think we're all nodding our heads here. I hear a lot of rattling going on, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of rattling going on. And so looping back into that immersive world and the experiential formats where we have real humans interacting.
Or actually real life. Real life. See, my sense actually of a gameplay dynamic would be, because how long does anybody wear a headset? Right? So now you look at game dynamics like, have you tried Last Seen Online? Totally cool game.
I have not.
Amy's lost iPhone. It is really cool. Look at it, company called Unread. Anyway, the point is, it plays out in real time over 7 days, and when a character tells you, I'm going to text you at 7, you have to wait until 7 for them to text you. So, my point of view is that when you start connecting people's real life with storytelling, that's when it becomes really emotionally engaging. And so, I actually think that if you could think about an appointment to stick the VR headset on type of dynamic that crosses over into people's real social media feeds or gamified fake feed, whatever you want to call it, that's a really interesting game dynamic for people to flip between their real lives and the actual game. Because it gives them a reason to put the thing back on, and you don't have to keep them there for 3 hours.
Right, so cue Ready Player One, but...
I mean, it's literally the definition of mixed reality. You're going between the different worlds. It's really fascinating, and I've already seen that in various little experiments that are based on real-world time.
Yeah.
Exactly, and then, Rick, from your point of view, where does your background kind of mold into all this?
I think we're starting to use a lot more machine learning and AI to bring content into that has sort of adaptive content that can work with environments like augmented reality. We're using it for like surface detection and things like that. But not only that, we actually have the ability to adapt the content based on the environment that we're actually experiencing in.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be really important, particularly in the AR sort of space, where we're now able to go and look at the context that the room is, the physical world, and tailor our experience for the virtual content into that. At the moment, it's a bit of a sort of layer, and it's not a good blend necessarily. But I think that's where we're going to see some. It's coming, and I think we get great storytelling when that happens.
Yeah.
And then keeping on top of that, so obviously you were in the audience today. Thank you very much for coming in the panel. What would be your dream situation of how you would experience film related to what you just said about the AI, machine learning?
I think the sort of Ready Player One experience is what I want. Now.
Cue Julian.
I mean,
so that oasis, that immersion,
I want
sticking
that.
it on.
I want that. And like even in my working day, I find myself wanting to get rid of my monitors and replace them with like HoloLens.
Yeah.
Because like they're just black holes in my space, and I want that.
Damn technology.
Well, once they get to a point where they've kind of increased the field of view to such a point with the AR and MR headsets, I think we'll be at that point, right?
Yeah, especially when you get to 64.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah.
I think what a lot of immersive tech and devices lack at the moment is that lack of intuitiveness. I think there are so many devices, and it go back to the omnidirectional treadmills, going back to the Icarus.
Say that 10 times.
But like, my biggest problem is that it takes some getting used to. It takes some real getting used to. It's not something you can pick up and play effectively. There are limitations, and actually, if we want to attract, across the demographics, not just the people who have an appetite or invested interest in these kind of devices and technology, we've got to make sure everything that comes out and everything that we put out there is intuitive in terms of user interaction, in terms of design, in terms of whatever.
Yeah, and I definitely think that will definitely happen in our lifetime in the next 50 years at some point, if not before that.
And I think everybody's kind of mentioned Oasis at this point in time, but I'm going to go back to that point of MMORPGs. And when we get to a point and I think companies like Improbable and Spatial West are going to be key in this aspect.
Yeah.
It's when we're going to be able to go into a Second Life or World of Warcraft type of world and then have storytelling within that world. So you're going to have experiences within that world, but you're going to have an ongoing investment into that world that it's really going to become a core part of human society, really, to go into those immersive experiences.
And that's where empathy no one will ever make anything.
But it's that virtual world, that second.
I actually disagree.
I love that Julian's biting at the jump here.
It's that Second Life type virtual world that needs to be as easy to interact with as our real world, or even easier.
So
This is from a technology perspective. I mean, this is where 5G starts to play a part as well, because
oh yeah, I was waiting for someone to drop the 5G.
once we get to a point where the network latency is so low, we can theoretically think that you can cloud render these experiences. So you have very high-end experiences which are being rendered from the cloud, and you're running them on very low-end mobile devices. So you think about running a PlayStation game or a super high-end gaming computer game on an Oculus Go, right? That sounds ridiculous now, but that's probably possible within the next couple of years.
Yeah, I have a slightly.
The doubting Dutchman.
I like it.
But that's why you're here, because we want to hear.
I agree with everything everybody said. However, my one twist to this is, I am not sure that people will get completely into the completely virtual world. The most powerful experience is real life, and it's about augmenting real life. And my sense of the most powerful feedback mechanism, as we talked about, is where you overlay the digital layer on real life, but it's integrated in real life. Because as you said, you want it to be as intuitive as real life. So augment real life, and it's about the digital layer as opposed to a full virtual layer. That's my strong point of view.
But then what happens when we get to a point where the virtual world is kind of uncomparable to the real world? I mean, they are the same, right? You feel what you meant to feel, you look how it's meant to look. What happens when you get to that point?
What's the question is, what is reality at that point?
Exactly.
What is real?
It's the Matrix.
What is real? Like when we do have that level of fidelity in AR or mixed reality, where the objects that are seeing virtually are as visually and potentially haptically feedback real as the real world, then what hell is real?
So I suppose that is the definition of virtual reality.
Look at what's happening right now. I mean, in maybe 500 years when that is like we're Ian Banks, whatever. But you look at what's happening already today, right now. Everybody's lives are massively digitized.
As of June 2018.
Everybody's lives is massively digitized, and one of the biggest growth markets is experiences with people don't need a phone. It's real. You're there with your mates. You go to the pub afterwards. You talk about it. And to me, that points to a reality where a future, at least in the next 20 to 30 years, where people are looking for real life connections with people that maybe digitally, like you might start digitally, but somehow it needs to transcend to the physical again. And that feedback loop is super important.
Yeah, that's true, and I agree with that. And at the same time, there is still a need for escapism, and still a need for a complementary element to what's happening in that real world. It is that once upon a time we had DVDs, not that long ago, and would I pay extra money for a director's cut or DVD extras or those behind the scenes? Yeah, if I'm that big of a fan in real life, yeah.
To me, there's something inherently fascinating about an alternate world that is unlike our real world, and I find that
you help create those worlds.
Well, I actively help create those worlds, but when it comes to this kind of stuff, just being part of the gaming community, I know I go to games, even though this podcast is about film, there's a key intersection in this respect, because we're talking about ongoing immersive experiences. I don't think we can keep pigeonholing it as like, this is going to be film, this is going to be games. It's going to completely blend together.
Transmedia cross-sector productions.
Exactly. And when somebody writes a really good story, you'll be able to experience it one way or another. So it doesn't mean that you're going to have to go like World of Warcraft style grind and then kill some zombies or some wild boars or something somewhere to get to a point. You're just going to be able to go on experiences that these different cues send you on. And I think it's for me, being able to go into a world that is completely and utterly unlike the world I live in is the reason why I'm there.
That's the escapism that we all bring for what we do for a living. So,
Each of us independently have, a little bit of an ego, right? So why not be our kind of alter ego and escape this world and become something else?
But not a douchebag. We want douchebag-free alter egos. So we're going to wrap things up, ladies and gentlemen. And
I'm not going to say that on this podcast.
So we're going to wrap things up with the Digital Jam sessions. Big questions. What's the one thing that you think needs to be changed, be that culturally or technologically in this world? Dan, you first, but in a one sentence, please. Okay, Julian, you first.
I mean, the biggest thing I think needs to change is the size of the technology. It's so big right now. It's so big, it's so inconvenient, it's so difficult to set up. It's not easy, and the barriers to entry are high right now.
Cue chunky mobile phone phase from 1995, right?
I also think there's a slight sort of stigmatization of hardware right now. I think to some extent people are a little bit ashamed, embarrassed to be using kind of virtual reality headsets in public. The number of clients that I have that kind of are very conscious of being in virtual reality whilst no one else is in a meeting or when we're showing them some content is
So what's the one thing you think needs to change, be that culturally or technologically?
People just getting used to
people. We want to change people
and their attitudes towards having a headset and wearing a headset.
But true.
The Google Glass dilemma, right?
Right, exactly. You don't want to look like what can I say?
A dork.
A dork. Yeah.
But we didn't even go into web VR, so maybe that's the next podcast over. Rick, what's the one thing that needs to change in one sentence?
I think when we stop using the word film or game to describe what we're doing in interactive spaces, where that blend, you look at cinematic game and then you look at film, what's the difference? We're just storytelling, and it's what is the
terminology for you needs to change?
Yeah, I think, and a sort of perception. I think we're getting to the point where the realism in these and the ability to do things in real time, that blend and that distinction is becoming very blurred.
Cool. And Mark. Mark is in deep thought.
Yeah, no, I will continue thinking because I think the answers these guys have given are all parts of my thinking. I also think that there is actually societally very much still a stigma against digital adoption. If you think about the way education thinks, you still need to learn how to read, write, math, and there's very little integration of these. I mean, there's lip service as opposed to full embracing. That to me is the one thing I would like to change.
So educational elements.
Yeah, really using the power of these technologies to actually educate. By the way, our kids are doing it anyway, but it's almost despite the system as opposed to the system is helping them. That's kind of what I'm.
So it'll be interesting because we will obviously be talking a lot, and if we have the same podcast in 10 years' time, let's do it 5 years. Listen, 5 years, a lot could change in 5 years, so we can see where your kids are now, age 10, how that gap changes. Gen Alpha. Isn't Gen Alpha under 5-year-olds though? Anyway, we'll get that. That's a whole separate podcast, isn't it? And Marcia. Last but not least,
I think that we need to crack VR and immersive entertainment as a social activity. So remove the isolation of the experience of having the headset on your face, because all of a sudden you've just blocked out everybody that's in the room with you. How can you make this a fully social, I won't say player, but multi-person experience that you can go through this world together with your friends, not your friends sitting next to you on the couch having no idea what you're going through and probably videoing you and then putting you on YouTube.
Right, which you don't want.
You really don't want, especially if you play a game like Doom VR. You really don't want that.
We thank you so much for listening, everyone around the world. Please share, tell all your friends, put comments below. We're going to have one last wrap up of what is the social media handle of your choice, of your channel, that we can reach you on or contact you on.
At Dan1, at DANWAN.
Julian's looking his up, but that's okay. What? Okay. Hi, Rick. Wait.
Julian CR.
What?
At Julian CR.
Okay. That at Twitter or what is that? Okay, on Twitter. Okay.
Twitter at Rick J Hartley.
I don't have one.
Would you have a LinkedIn?
Yeah, Marc Schipper.
That's SCHIPPER. Schipper. Not Schiffer, but say what you like. Claudia?
And for me, you can find me on Twitter at Martholio, and yes, that is a Beavis and Butthead reference.
I thought that was. As always, you can find me at Twitter at Mookie Approved, LinkedIn, Mookie Callhand. Thank you so much again for listening to Digital Jam Session. Thank you for everybody for the spontaneous chat outside a pub, Microsoft Reactor. Thanks for listening again, and thank you.
If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to subscribe and review, and follow us on Twitter at Digital Jam Ltd. Thinking of starting your own podcast? Why not speak to the GL Pro UK team? They handle all of our podcasting service needs. Tell them that Digital Jam Session sent you, and you'll get 10% off your first order. Find out more at www.glpro.co.uk.
digitaljamsessions.com